सर्वधर्मान् परित्यज्य मामेकं शरणं व्रज.
The miseries of material existence and the most hopeless conditions of life is the best possible opportunity to turn to God.
You're listening to Bare Knuckle Bhakti Shorties on the Bhakti Recovery Podcast with JivaG, coming at you every Monday with a little spiritual something. Hello, this is JivaG. Hi, everyone. It's nice to be here. Thank you for tuning in. So in this episode of Bare Knuckle Bhakti Shorties, it's going to be kind of a long shorty. So it's not going to be Bare Knuckle Bhakti Shorties. It's going to be Bare Knuckle Bhakti Longie Shorty. I'm doing this episode as an answer to the requests and the feedback that I got from you guys, and thank you so much for that, because I really want to serve this community, and I really want to do a good job. I'm a beginner at this. I'm a beginner at podcasts, and I really want to do good. Like, I want to do good, not for me, but I want to do good for people. So you guys are the people. So I will be only as good as your feedback. So if you're listening to this and you want more or you want less, or there's something that's missing, please tell me, because that's the only way that I can improve. But be kind, of course. So the request of me was this, that I should tell my story and explain a little bit about 12 steps, and explain a little bit about Bhakti, and explain how those two correlate in my life and my experience, strength, and hope with those. So that seems to be a pretty straightforward request, and I am glad to fulfill that. And a little bit about myself. You know, the reason why I didn't start this podcast about me is because I really, you know, I never really knew that people really wanted to know about that. I think people want to know a little bit about thoughts of things that I've learned. But at the request of people, they would like to know a little bit about my story. So I'm going to go into that. Not too long, only because there are other podcasts that I've been on telling my story. So I figured I want to tell my story again. And quite frankly, being in the program, a 12-step program for 27 years, I get sick and tired of my own story. I want to hear other people's stories. My story's boring to me. All right, enough of that. Let's get down. Let's get down and dirty. So my name is JivaG. I am a recovering addict, a recovering codependent, a recovering adult child of an alcoholic, and recovering from this material world as I know it. So I grew up in New York City. I was a hardcore punk rocker in the early 80s, hanging out. I left home at 14. I was asked to leave home at 14, and I did so. I was very happy that I did so. My home life was literally psychoterror. I think my home life was so unbearable to me that from the age of 11, I couldn't stop thinking about leaving. And, I'm not going to get into everything. I can just tell you that was one of the most uncomfortable places for me to be, was at home. And the second most uncomfortable place for me to be was school. So the walks between home and school were very long, and I delayed my way home and delayed my way to school because both of those places were miserable places for me. And when I finally left home, a 14-year-old alone on the Lower East Side of New York City with a bunch of punk rockers drinking 40s and smoking and whatever, that was life. That's what I thought. The story got worse from there, of course. And even after moving back in with my father, who lives on the Upper West Side, even moving back in with him when I was 17, or was it 18? I can't remember, 17 or 18. I felt more at home with my dad anyway, but I don't want to get into all that. It was a very dysfunctional households, both of them, both with my mother, my stepfather, and my dad's. Seriously dysfunctional. A lot of shaming and a lot of fear and a lot of tempers and a lot of guilt trips and a lot of, yeah. I kind of grew up in an atmosphere, and this is not just about the home life, but I grew up in the 70s and the 80s. There weren't such things as, ADHD, and there weren't such things as all of that. There was like some dyslexia, and then like they labeled you as like learning disabled. I just knew that from a very young age that something was seriously wrong with the world, and the world was trying to convince me that something seriously is wrong with me because I didn't think in these new terms that they say, like neurodivergent or neurotypical, or I think they call it. I was neurodivergent, always have been, never understood the neurotypical stuff, and it confused the hell out of me. And I was constantly told that I was wrong. There was no encouragement in those days for neurodivergent people. So basically, born, chucked into the world, and I felt like I was swimming upstream since then, you know. Fast forward, a long story of addiction. Fast forward, hitting a bottom, moving to Berlin, being a musician, having a daughter, dibble dabbling in the life of addiction, and then fully immersing myself into a life of the horrors and the bondage of addiction and the false self. Constantly looking for material sense enjoyment, anything to fill that God-sized hole. And I found it in heroin. That was my drug of choice. And it worked for me until it worked against me. When I surrendered to my disease, so what does that mean, surrendering to the disease? For me, it meant when I finally realized that I can't anymore. I can't have this life anymore. I can't live like that anymore. I can't keep continuing doing what I'm doing and having any kind of satisfaction in life. And when I finally said, I can't anymore, and hit that horrible bottom, a whole life opened up for me. And I was lucky enough to have found a 12-step program. I went to some meetings in the early 80s, well, the mid 80s. And I didn't get clean until 1997, after a long, long road of heroin addiction. And when I was ready to admit that I was powerless and my life was unmanageable, when I was ready, and at that point, a whole new life was opened up for me, which I am grateful for to this day. That was 27 years ago, 1997, on March 2nd. So let me talk a little bit about the 12 steps, because I think one of the requests was that I should go into the 12 steps. And I'm going to briefly go into the 12 steps. I'm going to briefly go into the 12 steps and how they relate to me, actually. So, and to everybody, because the 12 steps are the 12 steps. And through my experience, this is how I live them. So let's just go into the first step. And that is one, that we admitted it, we were powerless. Well, I'm going to use right now, first of all, I'm just going to use the 12 steps of AA because that's the OG. Now, I went to Narcotics Anonymous and Alcoholics Anonymous, both. And I found my sobriety, or my clean, my being clean in AA, actually. So anyway, one, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol and that our lives had become unmanageable. So what does that mean? That means that I have hit a bottom. This is my experience. I've hit a bottom. I've tried everything in my humanly power that I have to fight this disease of addiction. I had addiction, and that my life was completely unmanageable. And for me, it was very easy because it was the second time being homeless and out on the street, doing everything I said I wouldn't do, and being in so much pain. And just like, you know, it says in the 12 and 12, that's a book that we have at the end. Actually, I don't know if it's step 1 or step 2, but it says that we become willing. No, that's step 1. That we become willing as only the dying can be. And that was the position I needed to be in. Not everybody needs to be in that position, but I did. So I admitted I was powerless over my addiction and my life had become unmanageable. And the second step, after we've done that, after I did that, there was a relief. But then there was that small space of it being in the waiting room because, okay, now I know that I'm powerless over my addiction. My life is unmanageable, but now what? Now what do I do now? So I've run out of that burning building, but where am I running to? I came to believe, that's the second step, I came to believe that a power greater than myself could restore me to sanity. What does that mean? I came to believe that a power greater than myself can restore me to sanity. So that means after all that, where do I go, right? I've run out of this burning building. Where do I go? What got me in that burning building in the first place? My disease, my bad decisions, my whole life got me into that position from the very beginning. And all I knew was insanity in my life. And I've tried every person, place, or thing to try to help me fix this disease. But what I didn't try was to believe in a power greater than myself that could do that for me. And to tell you the truth, it was the biggest awakening in my whole recovery, actually. Because not only could I not cure myself, but no person, no rehab, no place, and no thing could cure that for me. I had to go higher than what was here on earth offered to me, higher. And believing that it was a possibility. I didn't even have to believe that there was a God and it was Christian or it was Jewish or it was a Krishna conscious thing. I didn't have to believe any of that. What I had to believe was that there was a possibility. And I did, because I had no freaking choice. So after that, step 3 comes and it says, we made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understand God. So let's make a decision. We made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to God. So it's definitely not a one and done. This is a constant thing that we do in our whole lives. Actually, the whole steps are constant. But let's just first concentrate on the one thing that gets in the way of us even having a life, right? So we got to get that out of the way first. So I made that decision. I made that decision to turn my will and my life over to the care of God as I understood God, which was very, very small, but it was enough because I had faith, and faith is what helped and saved me. And actually, at the beginning of my recovery, I started reading books like Dancing Woolly Masters by Gary Zukav and the Tao of Physics. And it was a very scientific kind of belief where they take like Eastern philosophies and kind of mix it with like either quantum physics or just, science. And it made a lot of sense to me because it was something very tangible. And I always needed something tangible. So when we have those first 3 steps done, I don't mean done forever because it's a constant, like I said, but when we really have like a basis of our lives based on those 3 steps, and we're pretty solid in that, we move on to step 4, because this is where it kind of gets, this is where we kind of get to below and beneath the surface of our obsession to use drugs, alcohol, or to act out in any associated behaviors, whether it be gambling or overeating, or codependency, or adult child behaviors, all of those things. So step 4 is that we made a searching and fearless immoral inventory of ourselves. So we made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. Doesn't mean that we have to be fearless, because a lot of people are very afraid of this step. However, I was not afraid of this step. This step was a welcoming step for me. And also because, we don't know what we don't know. So making a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves means we take inventory of the stock that we have in our emotional stock room, and not even just emotional stock room, the things we have done. So a typical AA 4-step is that we make a list of the people we have resentments with, what they did, and what it triggered in us, either like fear or whatever. And then, I always like to put on like, what was my part? That's the little part I put on, that's like the fifth column. What was my part in this? The reason why we do this is because they say that resentment and anger and all of that stuff is the root of poison for us recovering people. And it is very true. And it's also very important to realize what our behaviors are. And to see that line, that one thread that, we'll always see for me and with anyone who I've ever worked with in recovery or done, their fourth and fifth steps with, there's always a reoccurring theme and a reoccurring trigger that triggers either at the end of that, it's either fear or deep, deep hurt. Those are the two things: fear and hurt, fear and hurt, fear and hurt. No matter what you do, you're going to trace it back to fear and hurt. But we need to know what triggers those fears and those hurts. And we need to know how we, hurt people. So people who are hurt others. And we need to own that. It's part of the cleansing process. And we learn a lot through that. And after we've done that, and I really recommend that when you're doing a 4-step, you do it by the book. Because, and there's so many different ways of doing it. You can do it with ACA, which is like a very long, it's not even like it's not like a list. It's like a freaking workbook. I've done that. I've done the CODA 4-step. I've done all of the steps in CODA and NA and AA and ACA. I've done all of them. And each one is different in its own right. And each one addresses different topics. But each one has the same thing in common, and that's the solution. And all of them also have the same thing in common where it comes to hurt and fear. And in order for us to move on in a regular, healthy life, those things, need to be addressed. And sometimes it's a lifetime of work, which means sometimes even if we do a 4-step and write that list, and we move on to the 5th step, even after doing those steps, we got to go back and do them again. I do my steps every few years because I have to, because, I'm so conditioned in that way. So the 5th step is that we admit it to God, to ourselves, and to another human being, the exact nature of our wrongs. This is so important because after we've made that fearless and searching moral inventory of ourselves, we have the list, we have the fear, we have, we've named the fear, we've named the hurt. And we've named the things that we've done because we were hurt and fearful and how we lashed out on others. And some of us have a lot of guilt in that. So when we take that and we sit with our sponsor and we say a prayer to God of our understanding, and we get naked before God, our maker, ourselves, and another human being, which is usually your sponsor, talking about the exact nature of our wrongs, the exact nature of our wrongs. Doesn't mean the exact wrongs. It means the nature of our wrongs, which means we need to look at why we did those wrongs and we need to correct them. But that comes later. That comes within the steps. But first, we're just naming them, right? So so after that, there's like, for a lot of people, a lot of relief. It's like it's like a confession in front of yourself. Saying things out loud sometimes reaffirms things that, we even keep secrets from ourselves. There's like this haunting, daunting little thing. We push it away. It's called denial, and it's not a river in Egypt. But when we start talking about them, that's when the healing comes. We start to bring it to light. We take that stuff out of the darkness and bring it to light. So after that process, which is a very powerful thing to do, is to admit to God, to yourself, and another human being the exact nature of those wrongs. A lot of shame goes away with that. It's like like I said before, like a confession. We don't stop there. We go on. Yes, we do. We go on to step 6, where we were entirely ready to have God remove these defects of character, which means these things that we've named, the exact nature of the things that we've named, we ask God to come into our lives and to remove these defects of character. We don't have to, we do that in the 7th step. We were ready to have that. And how do we become ready to have that? Well, because we become sick and tired of being sick and tired. We become sick and tired of shitty behavior. Excuse my language. I'm trying not to curse, but it will slip out sometimes. We are sick and tired, and it becomes so painful that we want to change. And because we've done our first, second, and third step so thoroughly, knowing that we don't have the power to do that ourselves, and because that is a fixed faith in our program, we ask God to do this. We become ready. We were entirely ready to have God remove these defects of character. So when we become ready, because some character defects we don't want to let go of. Some we don't. Sometimes I love to have a road rage. I don't want to get rid of that sometimes, that energy. It's a lot of those character defects that we have were lifesavers. If we're looking into like ACA and other programs of recovery, those things were lifesavers until they weren't. So 7th step is that we humbly asked him to remove our shortcomings. That means since we've been sick and tired and we're ready to change, we ask him directly, please remove these. Please, God, remove these. Not a foxhole prayer. Not, oh my God, I drank again. I'm sitting in the toilet puking. Oh, I'm never going to drink again. Not those kind of prayers. We're talking about sincere, deep prayer coming from God, I can and you can. God, please help me to remove these defects of character because they don't serve me anymore. So after doing that, and like I said, this is a continuum, but after doing that formally, we go on to step 8. And this is where we need to kind of look about the 4th step, about our fearless moral inventory of ourselves, where we look at that list, the people that we have resentments with. And most of those people who we've had resentments with because they've hurt us or put us in fear, many of us will have lashed out and done something in retaliation. We can take those people, put them on our 8th step list. We made a list of persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. Now, this is a sticky, tricky one because so often, it takes 2 to tango, right? It takes 2 to tango. It's always like that. It takes 2 to tango. If you didn't do this to me, I wouldn't have done this to you. And he wronged me or she wronged me. And now, I feel that I am justified. This is a justified. No. If we want to work a spiritual program, those justifications will hinder us and poison us. That, what we say in the AA program, is the dubious, the dubious luxury of others, right? The dubious luxury of, no. Yeah, it could be that. The dubious luxury of the regular man who doesn't have to deal with these kind of things, which I don't believe exists. But when we become willing to make that amends list, when we make that amends list and become willing to make amends to them all, we take that list to the person that it's usually that person, doesn't have to be, but it's usually the person that we've done our 4th and 5th step with. We go over that list with that person and say, okay, is this okay? Because sometimes we put people on that list and either they don't really belong on the list or it's not really appropriate. But then, that's why it's important working with people who are experienced in this. Really important. But it's a thing about becoming ready and becoming willing to do it. And, even when I did my very first 4th step, it was a very, very, what's the word in English? Oberflächlich in German, which means shallow. So it was a pretty shallow, basic 4 step. I wasn't ready. I didn't have a lot of it. I justified a lot of things, and saw myself in the beginning of the program as being, a victim. But it's all fair game, You trick me, I trick you. Anyway. So the 9th step, after we make that list, we then go on with the, confirmation of our sponsor. that we made direct amends to such people whenever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. So what does that mean? That means we say sorry for the things that we have done. And because we've done a good, thorough fourth and fifth step, a fearless moral inventory of ourselves and thorough searching, we know what we've done and we know our motives because it's usually fear and hurt. And we make amends to those people whenever possible. And what does it mean except when to do so would injure them or others? That means, let's say you're, I don't know, let's say what would hurt somebody, if you know that there's a very, perhaps you've slept with someone's spouse 20 years ago and they're still together. They were just dating at first and you went and slept with that person's spouse and they're happily married with children. You don't go to that spouse's spouse and tell them you slept with their partner because that's going to disrupt their whole family. Those are things you're going to have to deal with yourself. Those guilt feelings, those kind of things, those are the things you got to deal with your program and ask God for forgiveness or ask yourself for forgiveness if that's better. Because we don't want to ruin anyone else's life because of our mistakes. And that's up to the other person to tell them if they want to, but it's not up to you to decide what's going to happen to someone else's family, if that makes sense. So having done all of those things, we have like a big chunk of getting sober. And I don't mean just from alcohol or drugs or what we're doing. We're getting sober. We're seeing things clearly. We've gone through these first 9 steps. We admitted we were powerless. We came to believe. We made a decision. We made a searching for moral inventory. We admitted to God. We were entirely ready. And we humbly asked him. And we, made a list and we made direct amends. It's a purification process. We go on to step 10, which means we continue to take personal inventory. And when we were wrong, we promptly admitted it. Wow, how important is that? That's really important. It's so important because once we've had our house clean, we got to keep it clean. We can't just like poo it up again. We gotta do the dusting and we gotta do vacuuming and we gotta do the mopping. And this is the maintenance stuff. A lot of us do like a nightly inventory, and there are apps out there that you can load down for that, where you can take your nightly inventories. I like to add a gratitude list to those. Not only what I did wrong, but also what I did right to kind of not get so down on myself, because some of us have the tendency to do that. It's very important to keep that maintenance. That's the maintenance thing. And the 11th step is a life of its own. The 11th step is a life of its own. It's that we sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact, and it says conscious contact with God as we understand him, praying only for knowledge of his will for us and the power to carry that out. That is the most profound and maintenance step, because after we've done all this work, we're at a space now where we're really, cleaning the wreckage of our past. We're on the path to get to know the God of our understanding. And we pray. We pray just for the knowledge of his will, which means the acceptance. And that's a lot of bhakti right there. And I'll tell you about that when I get into the bhakti thing. It's a lot of acceptance right there. And it's a lot. The 11th step makes me melt every time, because that's where we're allowed that, these tools that we've learned and that we've practiced in our daily affairs, it starts to pay off, and we start to have this a more clean and clear relationship with our higher power through prayer and through meditation and other things. Then we get to the last step, and that's 12. This is beautiful. Having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we try to carry this message to alcoholics and to practice these principles in all of our affairs. Wow. So we've gone through this process, going to meetings, we're living that life. And it makes no sense if we can't give it to somebody else. We've had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, and as a result of going to meetings, and as a result of doing what we're supposed to be doing in recovery. We try to carry this message to others and to practice these principles in all of our affairs. That means when we're in a meeting or when we're doing something, working with others or doing whatever, the moment we step out of that meeting and we're engulfed in this material energy, which is a Bhakti thing, and I will talk to you about that. The moment we do that, we don't stop working this program because we apply this in our daily lives. We want to live these principles. We want to live, eat, sleep, walk, breathe, think, do, act these principles in all of our affairs, not just at a meeting, not just with fellow members, with everybody, even with ourselves. That's the key. So that's, my thing about the 12 steps. That's my experience with the 12 steps. That's how I would explain them. So I hope to the people who gave me the feedback that that's a nice explanation. Now the program, any 12-step program, there are just certain real simple things. Do the steps with a sponsor. At the beginning, go to 90 meetings in 90 days. Do service. And love God. That's it. You just keep doing it. Repeat, repeat, repeat. We can't keep anything if we don't give it away. And just like that's why I'm here. I'm trying to give this away. This is I feel like I've been blessed with a spiritual gold mine. To keep it to myself would be miserly and disgusting, actually. And I just want to give it. If you want to take it. There are a million other ways, but this is just my way. And I feel like I wouldn't be doing what I'm supposed to be doing if I didn't do service and give this away. So let's go into Bhakti. What is Bhakti? Well, Bhakti is one of the practices of yoga. It is a practice of love and devotion to God, of service. It's Eastern yogic practices that are simple to follow, just like the 12 steps. There's all these ways of yoga, and one of them is a Bhakti. It's a Bhakti way. And Bhakti isn't a religion. Bhakti is a path, which could actually be applied in any religion. Bhakti is service, love, and devotion to God. That's it. So if your God is Jesus, then do service, love, and devotion for him. It's more tools in the toolbox. I practice it through the Gaudiya Vaishnav lens, which in layman's terms is the Hare Krishna movement. And before you get scared, because I'm sure a lot of people have, different ideas, just like with every religion. I'm not here to talk about a religion. I'm not also here to talk about what religion is right and what religion is wrong. I have been around long enough to know that every religion used responsibly in the attitude of love and service without an institution is good, period. The only thing that makes religion bad is bad behavior. So it goes hand in hand. If we're working a spiritual program and not a religious program, if we're working a spiritual program, then any religion is good. Where there's going to be religion, there's going to be humans. And where there's going to be humans, there's going to be corruption and there's going to be bad things. Just as there's going to be good things and beautiful things. Take what we want and leave the rest. Now, I am an advocate of following guidelines. Some religions call them you have to, or this will happen, or you must. But I look at it as offers. Everything is an offer. And when I'm ready with my path into whatever it is that I'm trudging the happy road of destiny to, it unfolds and I become more open to taking more of the things. And I surround myself with like-minded people. You know, in any religion, you can find your dogma anywhere, and you can find your liberalism and reformism anywhere, and you can find your orthodoxy anywhere. You can find any of it. You can find it. It's got the whole scale of everything else. Now, Bhakti really aligns with my belief system because it has a lot to do with material nature and the material world and its attachments and our conditioning, and it has a lot to do with the reincarnation and being a Gaudiya Vaishnav. Comes from a very distinct, bona fide, disciplic succession of teachers, which can be traced all the way back to Krishna himself. That is my higher power. I choose to call my higher power Krishna. And I choose to see God and the way for me to get to God in this lens through the 12 steps as well. These two things are amazingly parallel. Just as Bhakti and the 12 steps, both of those things can fit into any religion. The practice of Bhakti, the practice of the 12 steps could fit into any religion. And that's what, I'm going to put in the show notes. I saw this. So, one of the teachers is Prabhupada. Many of you may know him as the starter, the starter of the Hare Krishna movement. And I'm going to put in the show notes a little interview that he had in the 60s when he came over to New York in Tompkins Square Park. He actually, this funny thing is later, just a little side note here. I used to hang out in Tompkins Square Park. We used to break the benches for fire to keep warm at night, like all the homeless little teenagers. We'd hang out with the bums. But right by that bench, right by where we would set the fires and keep warm at night, there was a tree where Prabhupada used to sit under and meditate, and I never knew that. And I was just, all these weird things that happened in my life where in hindsight, I'm like, it's kind of magical. But anyway, now I have to remember what I was talking about. Yeah, the interview. So this interview, someone asked him, like, so what are you here for? Like, are you here to make us believe in Krishna? People, this is not verbatim, but this was like how I took it. People think that you're here to tell us that, the real God is Krishna. No. Prabhupada said, I am here to remind you that there is a God and that you should remember him. And that's the most beautiful thing I've ever heard. And that's what the program also advocates. Here's your God, and here are the things you can do to be close to God. And here are some tools that we can use. It's just that simple. Let me talk a little bit about, when we call in the program the disease of addiction, and we talk about in the 12 steps of the disease of addiction, and when we talk in Bhakti terms, the material nature in Maya, which is the world we live in this illusion. And there are two things, as an addict, as a recovering addict, a lot of us will hear in meetings like, I'm so grateful for my bottom, and I'm so grateful for all these things that brought me into, recovery, and I wouldn't trade it for the world. And a normal person would think, like, it's freaking insane. How are you grateful for, being a street urchin, being like a nasty junkie? How is that in any way good? But in Bhakti terms, and in the material nature, it is here to teach us lessons. It is not here to punish. There's no punishment. I'm not punished for being an addict. I am blessed with the opportunity to burn off some karma and to learn lessons. So when we constantly go out and try to fill that God-sized hole within us with material sense enjoyment, such as drugs, alcohol, shopping, gambling, relationships, you name it, anything, Instagram, all those things that we shove into that thing. And did you ever notice we can never get it? We're never happy. Ever, never, never. that we're never happy about with what we have. There's never enough. And it always seems like we're empty. So that's the material world. That's the material energy. And those are the things that, that addicts and alcoholics have a deep understanding of, because we tried to medicate that and it never worked until we found 12 steps, just like Bhakti. So when I got into Bhakti, I had a really bad bottom in my recovery. So I'm going to go into this real quick, because this is pretty important to this story and to how it correlates with one another, the practice of Bhakti and the 12 steps. So at about 1.5 years sober, I met another recovering addict, and we got married and had a family, and we had a great recovery together, and there were very, very dysfunctional behaviors that we both practiced with each other. Really painful, growing pains, and the truth is that I was so concentrated on just staying clean and sober and trying to adjust to having this quote unquote normal life, that there was no capacity for me to look at my codependency or all of the underlying issues. None whatsoever. I had not one drop. I knew they were there, and it always kind of scratched at me, and it showed its way in all different things. I developed, obsessive compulsive disorders, insomnia, all kinds of things, because those were the issues that I couldn't touch, because I was really had to concentrate on being a good mother, trying to work and be a productive member of society, and having this new relationship. It was insane, actually. If I, in hindsight, it's just, I've got to give myself some credit, actually. I went through a lot of suffering, um, and a lot of learning. So in hindsight, when I look at all of that, it's something, I think I couldn't have done any better, and I'm okay with that. I've had some closure to that. So when I realized, after 17 years or 16 years of being with this person, and having a child with him, and realizing that we really, he was a very spiritual person as well, and realizing that we wanted different things in life, and being in a lot of pain, actually, because I couldn't feel like I was living my authentic self, and I hadn't addressed issues that needed to be addressed years ago. Um, and like I said, because frankly, I was not capable of doing that. Energies were on other things, and that's really okay. I've got to forgive myself. I'm saying this over and over because I really need to forgive myself for that. Um, so I decided to separate. I decided to separate because I knew that I couldn't grow as an individual deep down inside. And I was so miserable in this relationship, not because this person was a miserable person, but because I hadn't worked on my issues, and he hadn't either. But that's not my business. My business are my issues. So I hit a bottom that I never thought I would hit again. It was a codependent bottom. The realization of codependency and the realization of the wreckage that it caused in my life, my inside as well as my outside life, um, and how detrimental that was. And knowing about a little bit about the Bhagavad Gita, and knowing a little bit about, looking, I grew up in the New York hardcore scene, where a lot of people became Hare Krishnas, and I had friends who were still in the movement, and I was really looking for a God. I just couldn't, I couldn't. In that moment, I was so desperate. I fell into the hugest depression you can't even imagine. I think it was the only time in my life I wanted to commit suicide. I really wanted to die. I even planned it. I planned on going to the hardware store and getting rope. I have a great place in the hall where I could just do it. Um, and I contemplated that for months, and it was unbearable. unbearable depression, just as deep and dark as it was using heroin. And I never thought that anything would be that painful. I'm even getting a little emotional talking about it. I'm going to pause this for a second. So again, here I'm back. So again, being in having the gift of desperation, and I call it that because these are the turning points in my spiritual life. After those hard times, there's always an awakening, and there's always something great that comes after. So I did what I could only do, and what I've always known to do is when I'm completely down, I reach out. And I reached out to a man called Kastuba Das. Kastuba Das, I used to know as David, and I grew up with him on the hardcore scene in New York. And he disappeared. I think I met David Kastuba when I was 13, and he was 16. And I know that he became a monk. So I reached out to him. Not a monk anymore. And by the way, if you want to know who Kastuba is, I don't even know if I mentioned this before, but Kastuba does an amazing podcast called Wisdom of the Sages. He does it with Raghu, who's an amazing, close, deep family member. I can consider them family members, my god brothers. And check out their podcast. It's amazing. I just got to plug that for a second. But I reached out to Kastuba, and we started going through the Bhagavad Gita together because I really wanted to know. I was in that spot. I had even lost faith in the program in 12 steps. And I can tell you why later. Well, I'll tell you why now. It's because I wasn't doing the 12th step. I wasn't doing service because I was asking, why can't I get something out of the meetings? It's because I wasn't giving enough. I wasn't doing service enough. So we can't keep what we have if we don't give it away. So instead of going into a meeting expecting something, I went into a meeting trying to give something. So when we were talking about, so basically the Bhagavad Gita, we went through the Bhagavad Gita, and what the Bhagavad Gita is, it is an amazing book. We read one specific Bhagavad Gita. It's called Bhagavad Gita as it is, from A.C. Bhaktivedanta Prabhupada. And it is something, it was a book. The story is this, I'm going to keep it really simple. It's about Arjuna and Krishna. Krishna is God in human form, and Arjuna is his cousin and best friend. And it's the process of Arjuna coming to believe in God in a 12-step way, which means Arjuna, actually the first step is like the last part, because in the end of this whole journey, it's like his struggle. It's Arjuna's struggle with having to live out his life and his duties and making those hard decisions. And these include like killing his own family in war who have wronged him, but also living to principles, spiritual principles, and trying to navigate through that. And it's his process. It's Arjuna's process of surrendering to God. And it's got layers, just like in the 12 steps. Arjuna, at one point, he also came to believe that Krishna was a power greater than himself and not just his cousin or friend. And he decided to turn his will and his life over to the care of Krishna. He admitted to Krishna all of his, his shortcomings and the natures of his wrongs, and talked to Krishna about this through the whole Bhagavad Gita. It just goes on and on. He prayed and meditated, and Krishna showed himself in so many ways, and Arjuna couldn't see it. And at the end of the Gita, he ends it with surrender, that you are, just surrender unto me, Krishna says. And that wonderful process to watch that and to go deep into the Gita about that process was the most wonderful awakening that I had ever had. And I explained both of my spiritual awakenings coming into the steps being able to surrender. And then also the second time, some people call it the honeymoon period. Some people call it a pink cloud. I call it my Wizard of Oz moment, where everything was in black and white, like in Dorothy when she was at home and all that stuff. That was all black and white. And as soon as she got to Oz, it was Technicolor. And that's kind of how both of those surrendering processes for me led me into a world of Technicolor, and saved my life both times. So besides the Bhagavad Gita, I mean, there's so much literature from Prabhupada and from people in the Gaudiya Math, in the Gaudiya Vaishnav and the Gaudiya Math. There's so many different disciplic successions, and they're all bona fide. Just like, with Catholic, in Christianity, you can trace everyone back to God, trace everyone back to Jesus. So it's the same principles. So diving into that and seeing the correlation between those two and how magically they're the same, I got to dive so deep into my belief in God. And when the pandemic hit, I had been, let me rewind a second. So getting into this with Kastuba and then meeting also one of his teachers, His Holiness Radhanath Swami, who is a guru. He is a monk. And he introduced me to that whole world. And I talked to Radhanath Swami about the 12 steps. And he really believes that the 12 steps are God-given and bona fide. And he believes, and this is what I love about Gaudiya Vaishnavism, if you're with the right tribe, they see it through a big lens and it's not dogmatic. And I can't take any dogma. I like strict rules and regulations and suggestions and guidelines, but don't get all dogmatic on me. Don't even go there. So I stick with my peeps. So he introduced me to this whole world, and there's just some lots of literature, and it's very overwhelming. It's very actually, I was very overwhelmed at first because there's a lot of stuff to learn. There's literature, there's this, there's that. It is insane. But if I'm in it for the marathon, I just do it step by step. I don't have to understand everything. So when the pandemic hit, I was listening to Wisdom of the Sages, and I had already started this Eastern philosophy, Bhakti infused 12-step meeting. And when the pandemic hit, I continued it online. It was very small. It was just local here in Munich. And I was listening to Wisdom of the Sages, and Raghu was like, hey, we should really have a recovery program, with Bhakti, with 12 steps in Bhakti. And I told Raghu, I was like, dude, I already have it. And then what I did was we just started doing it, and it just grew slowly. And it became a very good, safe space for people who were already practicing devotees in the Gaudiya Vaishnavism, in the Bhakti world, in the Bhakti yoga world. And it became a really safe space for people from 12-step programs who wanted to know more about Eastern philosophies of God and deep wisdom, and the practice of Bhakti yoga. And it meshed so wonderfully. And we have, 21 meetings a week. It's like almost 3 meetings a day, actually. So it's something that's grown, and it's an integral part of my recovery. We have our own literature, and it's all nothing original. It's all taken from the 12 steps or from our disciplic succession, from teacher to teacher to teacher, and just trying to do the best we can. Yeah. And we even have our own how it works. And actually, I think I'm going to read that right now. I hope this was informative. I hope you guys were interested in this. And I'm not trying to push any agenda at all. All I'm trying to do is share my experience, strength, and hope. And I hope this, for the people who gave me feedback, I hope this satisfies. If not, give me the feedback again, especially you, Raghu. I'm calling you out. Gave me this feedback. not only him, but he was the first to give it to me, and I appreciate it so much. So here's the Bhakti Recovery Group, how it works. The Bhakti so just let me explain. Krishna means God. Means all attractive. The word Krishna means all attractive. So when I say Krishna, it's because most people in the meetings believe in Krishna to be their higher power, but you don't have to. And if you have no problem with the word God and you really are interested in bhakti practices, please come. You don't have to believe in Krishna. You don't have to believe in God. You don't have to believe in anything. You just have to, our third tradition is the only requirement for membership is the desire for recovery. Period. Okay. No further ado, I will read the Bhakti Recovery. How it works. The Bhakti Recovery Group leads the way into a newfound life. These 12 steps are the foundation of our program. Our experience shows that when we work these steps with a sponsor, come to meetings on a regular basis, help another sick and suffering soul, we do recover. We ask Krishna to help us fully surrender to this program and practice these principles in all of our affairs. 1. We admitted we were powerless over our addictions and associated behaviors, and their lives had become unmanageable. 2. We came to believe that Krishna, a power greater than ourselves, could restore us to sanity. 3. We made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of Krishna as we understand him. 4. Made a searching, fearless moral inventory of ourselves. 5. Admitted to Krishna, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. 6. We were entirely ready to have Krishna remove all these defects of character. 7. Humbly asked him to remove our shortcomings. 8. Made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. 9. Made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. 10. Continued to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. 11. Saw through prayer, meditation, and the chanting of the holy names to improve our conscious contact with Krishna, praying only for knowledge of his will for us and the power to carry that out. 12. Having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to those seeking recovery and to practice these principles in all of our affairs. Honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness are all we need. We must remember that many of us have spent most of our lives trapped in various addictions to drugs, alcohol, sex, love, codependency, eating disorders, gambling, shopping, working, and other dysfunctional behaviors. So we beg of you to be fearless from the very start. Our lives didn't become unmanageable overnight, so remember that we practice these principles in our daily lives with patience and humility. We allow this process of Bhakti 12-step recovery to guide us into this new way of life. We who have taken birth in the age of we have taken birth in this age of Kali Yuga, an age of quarrel and hypocrisy. Therefore, we are prone to the never-ending pursuit of material sense enjoyment in its extreme. Bound and blinded by Maya, we ran around life trying to fill that God-sized hole with material sense enjoyment. We used people, places, and things, but nothing seemed to work. Repeatedly stuck in a cycle of insanity and expecting different results, but the results were always the same. Pain, devastation, and for some of us, even death. Many of us are practicing bhakti yogis, involved in temple communities. Some of us may be reluctant to share that we struggle with addictions or associated behaviors. The Bhakti Recovery Group is a safe, anonymous space for sharing honestly. Sharing in confidence is vital for our spiritual growth. We are born in this body with this diseased condition. This may be our karma, but with these simple tools, we are now able to take responsibility for our recovery. Step by step, we move towards living in spiritual solutions and move away from the shame and blame of our past. By working these steps and practicing bhakti devotion, we become grateful, and slowly the veil of Maya lifts. Our outlook on life changes. We come to know that everything is by Krishna's arrangement, and in gratitude we begin to know a life free from the bondage of the false self. So keep coming back, and don't leave before the miracle happens. So yeah, that is how it works. the Bhakti Recovery Group. That is how it works. And if people here are familiar with 12-step programs, it's very 12-step oriented. Nothing new under the sun, they say in Ecclesiastes. I don't know if anyone knows about Ecclesiastes, but it's one of my favorite books in the Bible. But there is nothing new under the sun. It's just another way of looking at it. So if it resonates with you, super happy. The 11th step, and I put the chanting of the holy names. So through prayer meditation, the chanting of the holy names, that's something that in the Gaudiya Vaishnav community, it's one of the things that we do. We chant the Hare Krishna mantra, which is Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. That's just a mantra, which means actually while you're chanting that mantra, you are connecting with God, because the names are God themselves. So that's one way that they practice the 11th step. A devotee would practice the 11th step by chanting. That's their way of meditation. So I hope that this cleared up some stuff, and I really hope that you guys got something from this. And like I said, I welcome any feedback, anything that I can improve to help serve this community better. I'm open to. So thanks so much for listening to this story. I hope someone got something from it. And if I can help in any way, or if there's anything that I can do to serve better, let me know. I wish you guys a great day or evening or wherever you are. Haribo.
Thanks for listening. I hope you liked the Monday Shorties. Don't forget to check out our full-length episodes on Thursdays. If you like what you heard, spread the word. Peace out.
सर्वधर्मान् परित्यज्य मामेकं शरणं व्रज.
The miseries of material existence and the most hopeless conditions of life is the best possible opportunity to turn to God.